Hi, welcome to Lies and Secrets channel. We hope you will have fun with us. Enjoy watching. Here I was sipping cold tea on our quiet porch, the setting sun casting shadows that seemed to stretch into the depths of my thoughts. Leo, once a tiny bundle of joy, had grown into something neither Lucas nor I had anticipated. That evening, alone in my comfy home dress, I faced an incident with Leo that would shake the very foundations of our life. As Lucas walked through the door with his usual cheerful "Honey, I'm home," I stood there, my heart racing, wondering how I could possibly tell him that our perfect world had just turned upside down. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across our suburban home as I sat on the porch nursing a cup of tea that had long gone cold. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of silence that amplifies the sound of your own thoughts. I remember the day we brought Leo home, his tiny paws barely making a sound on the hardwood floors. He was a bundle of joy, a little ball of fur that brought laughter and lightness into our lives. 3 years had passed since then, and Leo was no longer the small, manageable pet we had anticipated. He had grown into something else entirely, his size and strength overwhelming for his breed. My husband. Lucas and I had always been animal lovers, but Leo's transformation was something neither of us could have predicted. It was a typical Friday evening when the incident happened. Lucas was working late at the office, something about a project that couldn't wait. I was alone, dressed in my comfortable home attire, a loose-fitting dress that I wore when I didn't expect any visitors. Leo was unusually restless, pacing around the living room, his tail swishing with a force that knocked over a vase. I tried to calm down, but as I approached, he jumped, his paws landing on my shoulders with a force that sent me tumbling backward. The world spun as I hit the floor, my dress riding up in the chaos. Leo, in his excitement or perhaps confusion, did something unthinkable. His actions were swift, and in that moment, my world turned upside down. The silence that followed was deafening. My mind raced, trying to process what had just occurred. Leo, now panting beside me, seemed oblivious to the gravity of his actions. I lay there, my heart pounding, feeling a mix of shock, fear, and an inexplicable guilt. How could this have happened? Was it my fault for not controlling him better? Questions swirled in my head as I slowly pushed myself up, my body trembling. I knew I had to tell Lucas, but how does one even begin to explain something so unspeakable? As I stood adjusting my dress, the front door clicked open. Lucas's voice called out, "Honey, I'm home." His cheerful tones sliced through the heavy air, making my heart sink further. I took a deep breath, studying myself. The moment of truth was upon me, and as I turned to face him, the weight of my secret hung between us, unspoken yet palpable. What would happen next? How would Lucas react? And more importantly, how would this change everything we knew about our life together? Lucas's eyes met mine, and for a moment the world paused. His smile, always so warm and inviting, now seemed to probe the depths of my soul. I forced a smile, my L***** trembling slightly as I stepped forward to greet him. "Hey, you're home early." I managed to say, my voice a little too high, a little too strained. "Yeah." Project wrapped up quicker than expected. Lucas replied, his gaze lingering on me. "You look flustered, everything." "Kka." I nodded too quickly, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. "Just had a bit of a tumble with Leo. He's getting too big for his own good." Lucas chuckled, bending down to ruffle Leo's fur, who wagged his tail with innocent enthusiasm. "You need to watch your step around this big guy." The casualness of his response, the obliviousness to the storm brewing inside me made my heart ache. I wanted to scream, to tell him everything, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I said, "Yeah, I'll be more careful." Dinner was a quiet affair. Lucas talked about his day, the mundane details of office politics and project deadlines. I listened, nodding at the right moments, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying the incident over and over. Every clink of cutlery felt like an accusation, every pause in conversation an opportunity for confession. After dinner, as Lucas cleared the table, I stood by the sink, my hands submerged in soapy water. Feeling the weight of my silence, the kitchen light flickered slightly, casting shadows that danced across the walls, mirroring the turmoil within me. Lucas. I started, my voice barely above a whisper. There's something I need to tell you. He turned, his expression shifting from casual to concerned. What's wrong? I took a deep breath, the words heavy on my tongue. It's about Leo and me today. He did something that I didn't expect. Lucas's brows furrowed. What do you mean? I hesitated, the confession teetering on the edge of my L****. He was just so excited, and when I fell, he got too close. It was an accident, but... Lucas's face paled, his eyes searching mine for the truth. He feared too close. What are you saying? The room felt smaller, the air thicker. I could see the wheels turning in his mind, the pieces of our perfect life, rearranging into something unrecognizable. I'm saying, I paused, choosing my words with care, that Leo in his excitement did something inappropriate. I'm not sure how to handle it. Lucas's jaw clenched, his gaze dropping to the floor, then back to me. Are you okay? Did he hurt you? Physically I was fine, but emotionally I was a wreck. I'm okay, but I think we need to do something about Leo. Maybe he needs more training, or I don't know. The suggestion hung between us, a fragile bridge over a chasm of doubt and confusion. Lucas nodded slowly, his mind clearly racing. Well, figured out. Maybe we should take him to a specialist, see if there's something we're missing. Conversation ended there with a promise of action, but the air was charged with unspoken questions. As we prepared for bed, I could feel the distance growing, not just between us and Leo, but between Lucas and me. Trust, one so solid, now had cracks lying in bed. I stared at the ceiling, the silence oppressive. Lucas's breathing was even, but I knew sleep was far from his mind as well. The incident with Leo had opened a door to a part of our life we had never anticipated, and now we were both standing at the threshold, unsure of what lay beyond. The night deepened, and with it, my resolve to confront this head-on. Tomorrow we would seek help. But tonight, the weight of my secret, the fear of what it might mean for us, kept me wide awake, pondering the future of our marriage, our family, and the big dog we once loved so unconditionally. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow over our bedroom. I hadn't slept, the weight of the previous night's revelation still heavy on my C*******. Lucas was already up, his side of the bed, cold, a silent testament to the distance that had grown between us overnight. I found him, the kitchen, his back to me as he poured coffee into a mug. The usual warmth of our morning routine was replaced by a palpable tension. I cleared my throat, trying to find the right words. Lucas, we need to talk about Leo. I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He turned, his face unreadable. I've been thinking about it all night. I called the vet first thing this morning. They can see him this afternoon. The relief was immediate but fleeting. Okay, that's good, but Lucas, there's more we need to discuss. He nodded, setting his mug down with a clink that echoed in the quiet room. I know, let's sit. We moved to the living room. Leo watching us from his bed, his tail thumping softly against the floor, unaware of the storm he had unleashed in our lives. I'm worried, Lucas. I began, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, not just about Leo but about us. What happened? Changed things. Lucas's eyes met mine, a storm brewing in them. I'm angry, confused, and I don't know what to feel. But I'm here and we'll get through this together. His words were meant to comfort, but they only highlighted the rift. I feel like I've betrayed you even though it wasn't intentional. I'm scared of what this means for our marriage. He reached out, his hand covering mine, a gesture that felt both comforting and distant. We need to understand what happened. Maybe it's a one-time thing. Maybe there's something wrong with Leo, but we can't let this define us. Conversation was interrupted by the phone ringing. It was the vet confirming our appointment. The mundane task of arranging to take Leo to the vet felt surreal against the backdrop of our crumbling domestic peace. As we drove to the vet, the silence in the car was suffocating. I glanced at Lucas, his jaw set, eyes focused on the road. Leo in the back seemed to sense the tension, his head resting on the seat, looking between us with what I could only interpret as confusion. At the vet's office, Dr. Larson greeted us with his usual warmth, but his smile faltered as he took in our somber expressions what seems to be the issue with Leo today. He asked, his professional demeanor shifting to concern. Lucas took the lead, his voice low. Leo has been exhibiting some unusual behavior. We're worried he might be a danger to himself or others. Dr. Larson listened intently as I recounted the incident, my voice faltering at the more sensitive details. He nodded, jotting down notes. I understand. Let's start with a thorough examination to see if there's a medical issue at play. The examination was thorough, and Leo, ever the good boy, complied with every test. Dr. Larson spoke as he worked. Sometimes behavioral changes can be linked to physical health. We'll check for any neurological issues, hormonal imbalances, or signs of stress. The wait for the results was agonizing. Lucas and I sat in the waiting area. The magazines untouched, the silence between us, filled with unspoken fears and questions. When Dr. Larson returned, his face was grave. Leo is physically healthy, but there are signs of stress and perhaps some underlying anxiety. His behavior might be his way of expressing discomfort or confusion. I recommend behavioral therapy, and I can refer you to a specialist. The relief that it wasn't a dire medical condition was overshadowed by the realization that our problems were far from over. As we left the vet's office, Lucas's hand found mine, squeezing gently. "We'll get through this," he murmured, but his eyes told a different story. Back home, the atmosphere was charged. Leo, sensing the shift, was more subdued, his usual exuberance replaced by a cautious demeanor. Lucas suggested, "We start looking for a trainer immediately," and I agreed, though my heart wasn't in it. That evening, as we sat down for dinner, the conversation was stilted. Lucas tried to steer it towards normalcy, discussing work, the neighbors, anything but the elephant in the room. But the tension was palpable. Every bite of food a reminder of the unspoken issues between us. After dinner, Lucas announced he was going for a walk alone. I watched him leave the door, closing with a soft click that felt like a barrier being erected between us. Alone with Leo. I sat on the floor, his head in my lap, my fingers running through his fur. "I'm sorry, boy," I whispered, tears welling up. "I'm so sorry." The night stretched on, and when Lucas returned, his face was set in a mask of determination. "I've been thinking," he said, sitting beside me, his voice firm. "We need to address this head-on tomorrow. We'll start with the trainer, and maybe we should see a counselor for us." The suggestion hung in the air, a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters. I nodded, the fear of losing what we had built together, outweighing the fear of confronting our issues. As we prepared for bed, the distance between us seemed both physical and emotional. I lay awake listening to Lucas's breathing, wondering if we could ever find our way back to each other. The incident with Leo had not only shaken our trust, but had also exposed the fragility of our bond. The next day, as we prepared to meet the trainer, I felt a mix of hope and dread. Could we salvage our relationship? Could Leo be helped? Questions loomed large, casting shadows over our once simple, happy life, and as we drove to the trainer, a new, darker thought crept in. What if this was just the beginning? What if there were more secrets, more betrayals lurking in the corners of our lives? The road ahead was uncertain, and as we pulled into the parking lot, I realized that the real test of our marriage was just beginning. The drive to the trainers was filled with a heavy silence, each of us lost in our thoughts, the hum of the car engine the only sound between us. Leo sat quietly in the back, his eyes occasionally meeting mine in the rearview mirror, a silent plea for understanding. Upon arriving, we were greeted by a stern-looking woman named Ms. Henry, her demeanor professional yet warm. She led us into a spacious room with various training equipment scattered around. "Let's start by understanding what's been happening," Ms. Henry said, her voice calm and authoritative. I recounted the incident again, my voice barely above a whisper, the words feeling like sandpaper against my throat. Lucas's hand found mine, squeezing it in silent support, but his eyes were distant, lost in a storm of his own. Ms. Henry listened intently, her expression unreadable. Sounds like Leo might be dealing with some confusion or anxiety. Big dogs, especially those with strong instincts, can sometimes misinterpret human behavior or signals. We'll need to work on clear communication and boundaries. The session began with basic commands, but Leo seemed off less responsive than usual. His usual enthusiasm was replaced by a cautious demeanor, as if he sensed the tension between Lucas and me. As Ms. Henry worked with Leo, she spoke to us about the importance of consistency and the need to reinforce our roles as pack leaders. Big dogs need structure, she explained. They thrive on knowing their place in the family hierarchy. Without it, they can become confused or overly dominant. Her words echoed in my mind a metaphor for our own relationship. Had we lost our structure, our roles in this marriage? The thought gnawed at me as I watched Lucas, his face a mask of concentration, trying to follow M. Henry's instructions after the session. As we walked back to the car, Lucas's voice broke the silence. We need to talk more about us, not just Leo, he said, his tone serious. I nodded, feeling the weight of the unspoken. I know I'm scared, scared of what this means for us. He stopped, turning to face me, his eyes searching mine. I am too, but we can't let this break us. We need to fight for what we have. The drive home was quieter, but the air felt slightly less oppressive. Months home, Lucas suggested. We sit down, really talk not just about Leo but about us. We settled in the living room. Leo lying at our feet, his head on his paws, watching us with what seemed like concern. Lucas, I feel like I've failed you. I confess, the words tumbling out, not just with Leo but in our marriage. I've been distant, wrapped up in my own world. Lucas's expression softened, his hand reaching out to brush a tear from my cheek. I felt it too. I've been so caught up with work, neglecting what's truly important. But what happened with Leo? It's not your fault. It's on both of us to fix this. Conversation flowed raw and honest, revealing layers of neglect and misunderstanding that had built up over time. We talked about our fears, our frustrations, and our love, which, despite everything, was still there, buried under layers of unspoken grievances. As the night deepened, Lucas suggested, let's make a pact, no more secrets, no more holding back, we face everything together from here on out. I agreed, feeling a small spark of hope, and maybe we should see that counselor not just for Leo but for us. Lucas nodded, his resolve firm. Yes, for us. The next morning, after a restless night, I woke to find Lucas already up making breakfast. The atmosphere was different, lighter, as if our conversation had cleared some of the fog between us today. We start anew, Lucas said, handing me a cup of coffee, his smile tentative but genuine. The day was spent making calls, setting up appointments with both a big dog behaviorism for Leo and a marriage counselor for us. Each step felt like a small victory, a step towards healing. But as the day wore on, a new tension arose. While organizing some papers, I stumbled upon an old letter I had forgotten about from a time before Leo. Before the incident, it was from Lucas X, a woman he had promised was out of his life. The letter was affectionate, too affectionate, and dated. Just a month ago, my heart sank here. We were trying to rebuild, and yet this piece of the past threatened to unravel everything. I held the letter, my hands trembling as I heard Lucas's footsteps approaching. Lucas. I called out, my voice shaky. We need to talk about something else. He entered, his face a mix of confusion and concern. What's wrong? I handed him the letter, watching his face as he read it, his expression shifting from confusion to realization, then to something akin to guilt. This isn't what it looks like, he started, but the words felt hollow. The room seemed to close, and around us the fragile peace. We had just begun to rebuild, now hanging by a thread. What is it? Then Lucas? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, the weight of potential betrayal crushing me. The silence that followed was deafening. Lucas's face contorted with a mix of emotions, guilt, fear, and something I couldn't quite place. He took a deep breath, his eyes not meeting mine as he began to speak. This letter. It's from when I was trying to tie up loose ends with her. She wrote this after I told her we couldn't see each other anymore. I didn't respond. I swear I was going to throw it away, but I forgot about it. His words were like a cold splash of water, dousing the small flame of hope that had begun to flicker between us. Forgot about it. I echoed, my voice rising with a mix of disbelief and anger. Lucas, how could you forget something like this after everything we've been through, after what just happened with Leo? You think this is just something you can forget? Lucas's shoulders slumped, his usual confidence replaced by a palpable vulnerability. I know I messed up. I should have told you I was scared of how you'd react, scared of losing you over something that was over before it even started. The room felt suffocating, the walls closing in with every heartbeat. You were scared. What about me? Lucas? I've been terrified, feeling like our life together was still sping away. And now this. He reached for me, but I stepped back, the space between us now, a chasm of doubt. I need time, I said, my voice firm despite the tremor in my heart. I need to think. To process all of this. Lucas nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I understand, I'll give you space. Just know I'm here and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this. I turned away, unable to look at him, my mind racing with thoughts of betrayal of the life we had built together, now teetering on the edge of collapse. The sound of his footsteps retreating echoed in the silence, leaving me alone with Leo, who watched me with those big, confused eyes. The next few days were a blur. I moved through the motions of daily life, but my thoughts were consumed by Lucas's secret, by the letter, by the incident with Leo. Each moment felt like a step on a tightrope, with the abyss of our potential separation yawning beneath me. I spent time with Leo trying to reconnect, to find some semblance of normalcy. His behavior had improved slightly with the training, but the shadow of that day lingered between us. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow over our backyard, I sat with Leo, his head in my lap. Tranquility was deceptive, a stark contrast to the storm inside me. Lucas had been staying at a hotel, giving me the space I asked for, but the distance did little. To ease the pain or clarify my thoughts, I needed answers, not just from Lucas, but from myself. Was our love strong enough to withstand these betrayals? Could we rebuild? Trust. The phone rang, slicing through my reverie. It was Lucas. Can we talk? He asked, his voice tentative. I agreed, feeling a mix of dread and necessity. He arrived shortly after, looking as if he hadn't slept well. We sat in the living room, the space between us heavy with unspoken words. I've been thinking a lot. Lucas started, his voice low, about us, about what I did, about what happened with Leo. I've been to see a therapist, trying to understand my own actions, my own fears. I listened, my heart, a mix of hope and skepticism, and I realize now how much I've taken for granted. I was selfish, not just with the letter, but with my time, my attention. I want to make amends, not just for the letter, but for everything. I want to go to counseling with you, to work on us. His sincerity was palpable, but the wounds were fresh. Lucas, I want to believe you, but trust isn't something you can just rebuild overnight. It's not just about the letter. It's about everything that's been piling up. He nodded, his eyes meeting mine with a raw honesty. I know I'm not asking for forgiveness right away. I'm asking for a chance to prove I can change that. We can change. The room was silent save for the soft breathing of Leo, who seemed to sense the gravity of the moment I looked at. Lucas really looked at him, seeing not just the man who had hurt me, but the man I had loved, the man who was now offering, his heart broken and all oka. I whispered the word, feeling both heavy and light. Let's try, but we start with counseling and we're honest, completely honest. From now on, Lucas's relief was visible, his body relaxing slightly. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I won't let you down again. As he left that evening, the promise of counseling and the commitment to honesty hung in the air, a fragile hope. I watched him go, feeling the weight of our shared past and the uncertainty of our future. The next day, we attended our first counseling session. It was uncomfortable, raw, but necessary. We spoke of our fears, our mistakes, and our desires for the future. Counselor Dr. Ellis listened intently, her eyes moving between us, absorbing the layers of our pain and confusion. Dr. Ellis began. Thank you both for being here. It's not easy to confront these issues, but it's a crucial step towards healing. She paused, giving us a moment to settle into the gravity of our situation. Let's start by discussing what brought you here today. Lucas took a deep breath, his voice steady but strained. We've been through a lot. There was an incident with our big dog Leo which had shaken us both. And then there's this letter from my past that's come up complicating things further. I nodded, adding, feels like everything is unraveling. We're trying to understand how we got here, how to move forward, and if we can even trust each other anymore, Dr. Ellis leaned forward, her expression. Compassionate trust is indeed the foundation of any relationship. Let's explore what trust means to each of you and how these events have impacted that trust. The session unfolded with a painful honesty. Lucas spoke of his guilt not just for the letter, but for the emotional distance he had allowed to grow between us. I've been so focused on my career, on proving myself, that I lost sight of what was truly important. I didn't see how much I was neglecting us. I shared my feelings of betrayal, the fear that our life together was built on fragile ground. I felt alone. Lucas, even when you were right beside me, and now with Leo with the letter, it's like I'm seeing our life through a cracked lens. Dr. Ellis guided us through exercises designed to rebuild communication, to express our needs and fears openly. Communication isn't just about talking, she explained. It's about listening, truly listening to what the other person is saying and what they're not saying. As the session drew to a close, she gave us homework. I want you both to write down 3 things you appreciate about each other and 3 things you wish were different. We'll discuss these next time. Leaving the counselor's office, the air between us felt charged with a new kind of tension, not of conflict but of potential. We drove home in silence, each lost in our thoughts, the weight of our confessions settling around us like a heavy fog. Back at home, Leo greeted us with his usual enthusiasm, his tail wagging, oblivious to the storm he had been at the center of. I watched him, feeling a mix of affection and confusion. We need to keep working with him. I said, more to myself than to Lucas. Lucas agreed, his voice soft. Yes, we do, for all of us. That night, as we lay in bed, the distance between us was palpable. Yet there was a thread of connection. Fragile but present. Lucas, I whispered into the darkness. Do you think we can get through this? He turned to face me, his eyes searching mine in the dim light. I want to believe we can. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Are you? I nodded, the fear of losing him, warring with the hope of rebuilding. I am, but it's going to be hard. It will be. He agreed, his hand finding mine under the covers, but maybe, just maybe, it'll make us stronger. The days that followed were a mix of therapy sessions both for Leo and for us. Leo's behavior improved, his training sessions, with Ms. Henry showing signs of progress. He was learning to respond to commands more reliably, his anxiety seemingly lessening with each session. Our marriage counseling sessions were more turbulent, each session peeled back layers of our relationship, exposing vulnerabilities and past grievances we had both ignored. We learned to argue constructively, to listen without planning our rebuttal, to understand rather than to win. One evening, after a particularly intense session, Lucas and I sat in the living room, the silence between us filled with the echoes of our shared revelations. I've been thinking, Lucas started, his voice hesitant. Maybe we should take a trip, just the of us, a weekend away, to reconnect away. From all this, the idea was both terrifying and tempting. A break might be good. I admitted, feeling a flicker of excitement at the thought of escaping our current reality. We planned a getaway to a secluded cabin in the mountains, a place where we could be alone with our thoughts and each other. The drive there was quiet, but not uncomfortably so. The scenery, with its towering pines and the crisp mountain air, seemed to cleanse some of the tension from our minds. The cabin, surrounded by nature's tranquility, we began to talk, really. Talk. We shared stories of our past, dreams for the future, and the fears that had kept us silent for so long. One night, under a sky speckled with stars, Lucas took my hand. "I've been thinking about what you said about feeling alone. I'm sorry. I let that happen. I want to be there for you in every way." I squeezed his hand, feeling the sincerity in his touch, and I need to be more open to share my burdens instead of carrying them alone. The weekend was a turning point. We laughed, we cried, and we made love with a tenderness that felt like rediscovering each other. It wasn't just physical, it was an emotional reconnection, a reaffirmation of our commitment to each other. Turning home, the world seemed different. Leo greeted us with his usual exuberance, but now it felt like a symbol of hope, of life. Moving forward, we continued with our therapy, both personal and marital, with a renewed vigor. Months passed and slowly the cracks in our relationship began to mend. Trust was being rebuilt, not in leaps but in small, steady steps. Leo too was thriving, his behavior more in line with what we had always hoped for him. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Lucas turned to me. "Do you remember when we first brought Leo home? How did everything seem so simple?" I smiled, the memory warming me. "Yes, and look at us now, we've been through the fire, but we're still here." He nodded, his gaze meeting mine with a depth of understanding. "We've changed, grown. I think we're stronger for it." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over our home, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been arduous, filled with pain and revelations, but it had brought us to this moment of clarity and hope. And what about Leo? I asked, looking over at our now well-behaved big dog who lay at our feet, his tail thumping softly. Lucas chuckled. "He's part of our story now, a reminder of how we can overcome even the most unexpected challenges." We sat in silence, the kind that now felt comfortable, filled with the promise of a future built on the lessons of our past. As the stars began to twinkle above, I realized that while our story had its share of darkness, it was also illuminated by moments of profound love and resilience. The end of this chapter was not just an end, but a beginning where trust was not just a word but a living, breathing part of our daily life. And as we stood up to go inside, I knew that whatever lay ahead, we would face it together with honesty, with love, and with the understanding that sometimes the most profound changes come from the most unexpected places. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. If you enjoyed the story, this will help us create more engaging stories for you. My story ends here. If you feel that this story is meaningful and brings useful lessons, please like and subscribe to the channel to support me. Thanks for listening and see you in the next videos.